Hallway ghosts and special concoctions. Henry steps out into the hallway. He takes his jewelry from Julia, filled with emotion. Then he notices Julia strolling along the neighboring corridor. However, he believes she is a ghost. "No, my buddy. That's your wife." Ned invites Henry into his office for a conversation. Later, Julia knocks on Ellen's door. Mrs. Fitz responds, perplexed as to why a maid from Castle Leathers is here. However, Ellen recognizes Julia. Julia tells that she has a method to assist Ellen pass her test. It is a mixture, but it must be administered and allowed to tighten before Ellen takes the exam. Ellen begs Mrs. Fitz to buy Julia what she needs. "Help me." Next, Henry informs Ned that he attempted to flee the Grants but was apprehended. The only reason he still has his head is because Isaac wants him to observe the purity test. But Henry can't take it anymore. He's seeking to ingratiate himself with Malcolm by appealing to his capacity for love. Malcolm is less ruthless and more kind than Isaac. Perhaps Malcolm can persuade Isaac to let Henry leave. If that doesn't work, Henry asks Ned to help him escape. Ned promises to help, proposing to meet with Henry at a later date to work out a thorough escape plan. Ah! What a buddy! Julia applied the mixture on Ellen's parts. The latter meets Malcolm outside her room. Malcolm admits that Henry planned this for him. He wanted to check on Ellen. He knows she'll prove all those naysayers wrong. Testing, testing. Then comes the moment of truth. Ellen and Mrs. Fitz enter the large hall, where the men await them. Clan Grant's physician instructs her to take off her dressing robe. They begin with a urine examination. A virtuous woman's water is as clean as crystal, colorless. Initially, Malcolm and Ned try to get Ellen out of the urine test. But our daughter simply wants this over with, and I can't blame her. So Ellen downs a cooked sea holly concoction. Yum. Then she waits. A lady should be able to hold her own water. After a while, the physician instructs her to relieve herself. Ellen urinates in a pot. The doctor and priest check her urine, finding it to be crystal clear. Next, it's time to examine Ellen's downstairs to see if she's intact. How invasive. The physician conducts the examination. Poor Ellen looks so uncomfortable. Hopefully, Julia's concoction will fool these fools. Virgo intacta, the minister announces to everyone in the great hall. Huzzah! It worked. Colum looks relieved. Hope springs eternal. Ellen and Mrs. Fitz return to Ellen's apartments to notify Julia that her techniques worked. Ellen is in the clear. Mrs. Fitz and Ellen thank Julia. Mrs. Fitz is still perplexed as to how Julia slipped inside the castle. However, she remains thankful. Julia and Henry eventually run into one other in the corridor. Initially, Henry is skeptical. His wife has died. Is he seeing her ghost again? Julia springs eternal. Ellen and Mrs. Fitz return to Ellen's apartments to notify Julia that her techniques worked. Ellen is in the clear. Mrs. Fitz and Ellen thank Julia. Mrs. Fitz is still perplexed as to how Julia slipped inside the castle. However, she remains thankful. Julia and Henry eventually run into one other in the corridor. Initially, Henry is skeptical. His wife has died. Is he seeing her ghost again? Julia motioned for Henry to accompany her downstairs. Henry follows her as she descends the stairs. He strokes her face. Henry still doesn't believe it. Hope springs eternal, Julia adds, grasping his hand. That demonstrates to him that she is genuine. They kiss. Finally. My babies have been reunited, and it feels great. Henry asks about their child. Julia says that she named him William, after Henry's grandpa. My heart. Unfortunately, Brian cuts the reunion short, informing Julia that they must depart. After this, he realizes Julia has found Henry. Julia introduces them to one another. Before they separate ways, Julia informs Henry she is at Castle Leathers and that they will meet again. Ugh. Clan shakeup. After Julia and Brian leave, Arch discovers Henry by himself. Henry said he believed he saw his wife. We notice a smile on his face. Outside, Malcolm misinterprets Henry's joy about Julia for delight over the outcome of the purity test. Henry plays along, stating he has never questioned Ellen. Malcolm praises Henry for what he has done for the clan. At the same time, Mrs. Fitz apprehends Brian and Julia before they escape down the tunnel. She returns Brian's tartan from Ellen's possessions. Mrs. Fitz advises Brian to keep away from Ellen. Following this, a rider appears bearing a letter for Malcolm. Henry opens it and reads it quickly. He informs Malcolm that Isaac Grant has died. Ellen ultimately reveals to Mrs. Fitz that she is not a virgin. Mrs. Fitz guesses it's her nephew Murtagh, but Ellen disputes that he was her first. In fact, she refuses to identify Brian. She swears to carry his name to the grave. Meanwhile, Davina is concerned about Brian's reckless behavior. She insists that Ellen MacKenzie will kill him. Davina asks Julia to back her up. He cannot travel to Leoch. Julia admits that Davina is correct. However, she has a remedy for Ellen's purity test. She combines crushed sugar with eggs. Then she grabs the alum. Julia inquires whether Brian has gunpowder or saltpeter. Julia concocts a potion to assist Ellen pass her test. She informs them that she read about these compounds functioning not to repair a woman's hymen but to create the illusion of virginity. Davina was unaware that Julia could read. Julia references the Trotula, a medieval compendium of women's medicine, pointing out that women have been self-medicating for centuries. Julia agrees to join Brian to Leoch. After all, she had already entered the castle through a secret tunnel. Brian initially strongly